Borough President's Office. They put their heart and soul into the report Startup City and this great conference. And if we can give them a big round of applause. And I am so pleased today that we're going to have a discussion about the tech economy, about the middle class, about some of these critical issues that we learned about and talked about all day today with a number of individuals who I know personally and I respect a great deal. Candidates for mayor who are represented here today are people who have tremendous, distinguished careers. They're very serious about the issues facing our city, and they each love the city of New York. And I have worked with all of them, and I think this city is a lot better for the fact that they are here talking to all of us. And if you think about the mayoral debates that have been occurring around the city, they have been out sometimes one or two a day, sometimes from morning to night, talking about the issues, and it's only April. So they really deserve a lot of credit. And we think this issue is particularly important because this speaks to the economy of our entire city. And I'm very proud that they're here. So without further ado, I want to introduce the candidates who are here today. Former Councilmember Saul Abeles. Give him a round of applause. Advocate Bill de Blasio, the Controller of the City of New York, John Liu, the Speaker of the City Council, Christine Quinn, the former Controller of the City of New York, Bill Thompson, and my former colleague, former Manhattan Bronx Borough President, Adolfo Carrion. And I'm also really pleased that we have a very, very special treat. Our moderator today is the editor-in-chief of BuzzFeed, but he's somebody we all know in New York City as one of the great reporters and bloggers of his generation, the godfather of the political blog. He has a national perch, but he's come down to talk to us in New York City, and I am not trying to offend him or anything, because I don't want to get, but he's somebody that I think can all agree is smart, insightful, and I couldn't think of a better moderator for this debate on technology and the entrepreneurial city. Please welcome Ben Smith.
Thanks so much for having me, Scott. I'm obsessed with tech policy and with this contest, but also, unlike Dave and Mike, my friends here don't have to maintain relationships with these guys. So it's like a perfect position. And yeah, thank you all for coming. And I guess I wondered if we could just start kind of on a personal introductory note. If you wouldn't mind, I guess just starting with Speaker with Comptroller Thompson. Would you tell us whether you have an Android or an iPhone, and what your and what your favorite app is, if you do?
I've got, let's see, I have both a slightly older BlackBerry and also a newer iPhone 5. Favorite, let's see, it's not Doodle Jump, no, it's, let's see, favorite app, I have a number of them, but what is it, no, just a number of favorite apps, so I don't know if I have one favorite app.
And now everybody else has had time to figure it out. Speaker?
I'm a BlackBerry gal. I have 2 BlackBerries. I have an iPad too, but I really have to say I'm a BlackBerry gal. And StumbleUpon is something I've started using now that I like a lot. So StumbleUpon.
Thanks, Ben, for doing this and for asking these insightful questions.
It gets better.
I have an iPhone, although I certainly like Blackberries. I used Blackberries for a long time, and I guess I'm on Pandora quite a bit.
Thanks, Ben. I'm sure this is going to be enlightening for the electorate. I have an iPhone, and one of my many favorite apps is the music app that John mentioned, Pandora. It's on practically all the time.
BlackBerry, definitely BlackBerry. Major League Baseball app, MLB.com.
BlackBerry user, also Major League Baseball.
All right, I think that's enlightening. Contra, Comptroller Lou. But to jump over to policy, I was sort of, I kind of this really excellent report they put out divides tech policy into several categories, including education, connectivity, the business climate. But when you start thinking about them, I mean, and actually, I'm going to steal Andrew Richet's line over there. But the extent to which technology isn't a slice of the pie, it's the pan. And when you start thinking about these issues, a lot of them interconnect. And I was looking through some of the proposals that the folks here have put forward. I saw Speaker Quinn has proposed giving tablet computers to every kid in every school. And I guess I wondered if you'd talk about the logic of that a little bit. Also, how you'll ensure they'll be able to use them in a city where Wi-Fi can cost, I think it's like an average of $80 a month at home. And I think a lot of public school kids probably aren't going to be able to bring those home and connect them to the internet. And I wonder how that's going to work.
Sure. I mean, first, I think the idea behind the tablets, and let's just put this in kind of a financial context, we spend $100 million a year on textbooks, right? So we want to be teaching children in a 21st century context so they are prepared for life and jobs and careers in a 21st century context. So tablets are certainly part of that. Now, one way to make sure children are prepared to use them is to make sure that in the Common Core, computer science is part of the Common Core. That's something we all have to remain focused on, right? Two, as we move from textbooks to tablets, we can divert those financial resources. There are certainly, you're absolutely right, Ben, going to be challenges in individuals' homes, because not every neighborhood is as connected as just able to be connected, and not every household is as connected as we would want it to be. So that's something we're going to need to think, one, in a public-private partnership about, and how we can have public-private partnerships come and help aid students and families who are in that situation. Two, one of the things that the libraries are really interested in right now in working with all of us on is how they can also help fill that gap and be places where folks who don't have the ability one way or another to be connected online, that they can get that ability there. So I think we need to be teaching for it. We need to recognize to use our financial resources in a more 21st century forward-looking way. We need to seize the opportunity of public-private partnership through getting financial resources that might help these families, and also through great institutions like the libraries.
Comptroller Lou, I thought you...
Thank you. I think the kids nowadays do need access to that technology. And I would start by making sure that all the middle schoolers in New York City public schools have access to actually to a real computer. I think the tablets and all the mobile devices, they serve some function, but I think these kids, they really actually need a real computer where they could do, where they could not just get access to the internet, but they could actually use software packages, and nowadays they call them apps, but real software that actually helps them do research and put together the reports and analysis that is truly necessary to get them to continue to hone their analytical skills. And it's not about computer science per se, it's not teaching kids about the computers. Nowadays, my son Joey's a 12-year-old in public school, he's in the 7th grade. You don't need to teach any of these kids how to use these devices. It's almost intuitive. They know immediately, much quicker than I think anyone sitting on this dais can figure it out. But so it's just about equipping them and making sure that not only do they have the machines, but they have the access to the Wi-Fi. And I think that there is a huge amount of potential to work with our telecommunications giants who, they do pretty well here in New York City and beyond. And I think to the extent that we can identify certain incomes in certain families with income levels below a certain range in parts of New York City, I think that there's a potential for the telecommunications companies to provide some of that service, I would say pro bono. And there is some legislation or initiative at the national level that encourages or incentivizes this kind of work. So I think there's a great deal of potential, but the bottom line is we have to get the equipment, real computing equipment, in the hands of first our middle schoolers, and then work with the telecommunications giants to get that Wi-Fi out.
Comptroller Thompson, just you're a former president of the Board of Education as well. I wonder, both on the gadgets, but also on the question of what they're learning. As as John Lewis said, they know how to use the computers. Are they going to be taught coding? What should they be taught?
Well, I think that it's, to some extent, to go back to when I was president of the Board of Education, we did something that we called the Laptop Initiative in School District 6 in Manhattan, which was Washington Heights. We put stripped down laptops in the hands of children, and a number of children in that district. And one of the things that you found, which was amazing, when you talk about how would they learn, you put technology in the hands of children, they figure it out in a lot of ways, and also the thing that we found, they were teaching their parents and their grandparents how to use technology. That was the thing that was amazing. So it is, first, and whether it is, lighter computers these days, or whether it's tablets, and the price of tablets, that's the one thing. You can have a teacher in a classroom with kind of a larger tablet, and then smaller tablets with each of the students. You can have students at different levels working on similar things at the same time. I think it is making sure that we really, that the teachers, that we make sure that they have the ability to teach. It's not the old computer rooms. It is bringing that technology directly into the classroom and talking about technology, not as smart boards, but as whether it's smaller computers or tablets, and I favor the tablet since it's cheaper. I just think it's a great opportunity, and our teachers being able to then instruct students in the use of it. But a lot of it is our young people figure it out on their own, and then it really creating those partnerships with the internet companies in definitely communities and poor neighborhoods across the city of New York to kind of bridge that digital divide. There are a lot of public-private partnerships out there, and the opportunity to be able to cross-subsidize in a lot of ways. And I think there are a number of companies who've expressed that interest in being able to do that.
I was concerned I wouldn't be able to get you to disagree on anything, but we've got at least laptops versus tablets.
I favor the tablet, to be honest, okay?
I agree that the equipment is essential, and we have to establish public-private partnerships when it comes to computer science. I mean, it should be part of the curriculum, math and science, and the computer code should be an integral part of school curriculum today. But there's a fundamental problem that goes a little deeper that we have to address. I taught in New York City public schools for 11 years. We have a lack of math and science teachers in our schools. Many of the math and science teachers in our public schools are teaching at a license. So we've got to incentivize math and science majors to teach in our schools. While we can't compete with the private sector in terms of compensation, we can certainly offer bonuses and incentives to have math and science teachers working in our schools, because that's essential, because that's part of the process. The equipment is great, but if you don't have people who are proficient in teaching in this area, all of that is for naught. And we have also structural problems in our public schools that need to be addressed. We have to intervene early. So many of our young people, we have kids coming into school buildings at 4 or 5 years of age that are so far behind, because those first 3 years are pivotal. Poverty causes stress causes developmental issues, and we've got to intervene early. So while the equipment is great, and I'm all for it, we also have to address the underlying issues if we really want to make a difference.
And I hope I get all the honorifics right, but President, carry on.
Yes, thanks. I think if we're going to make the full leap to the app economy, and a modern global economy, and an information technology economy that is able to be agile in the global marketplace and ensure our competitiveness globally, there's a more fundamental thing that we need to do that is akin to what we did in 1956 when we laid out a highway network across this nation to be able to take the economy to the next level and move goods and people and food around and ensure that we were able to grow our economy and continue to be globally competitive. So I think that while the ideas are good and we probably can make the shift from paper and ink to digital and online and wireless, if we don't have the infrastructure to sustain that, and I think you guys understand that, we're not going to be able to make that leap to be competitive. So one of the things that I think we need to do as a city, as a state and nation, obviously, is to invest heavily in almost like a federal highway infrastructure program, but this time, obviously, a digital and online and wireless highway that will sort of incent then creative options for education and other applications.
That's going to be basically my next question for everybody, but Mr. Public Advocate, do you have any thoughts? I mean,
yeah.
it's particularly I'd be interested in kind of the scale of investment we're talking in education. I mean, it's a lot of money that could go elsewhere.
Look, I think efforts, for example, to get tablets to our public school kids are commendable, but I think the fundamental issue is access and affordability, and we have an affordability crisis in this city when it comes to internet access. We are one of the most expensive venues in the world. You know, the fact is almost half the people in this city cannot afford internet service. And I think, you know, Scott Stringer did this op-ed today, and I want to just commend him because it gets at the equity issues we're facing and the fact that we don't address them more forcefully. Not only will our economy not thrive, but we won't address what I always say is a tale of two cities, the profound economic disparities that are deepening in this city. The way to get at it is for the city to work with the private sector differently. Today I sent this letter to the city's CIO demanding information, which is not public at this point, that needs to be public, about our franchise agreement with Verizon. Verizon was supposed to have provided affordable, high-speed internet access through fiber optics to almost 80% of the city by now. The fact is that only about 50% of the city has been reached, and coincidentally, a lot of our lower income neighborhoods in the outer boroughs have been left out of the equation. I'm demanding that Verizon in the next 30 days provide a clear plan for how it is going to get back on track and have this whole city ready by the deadline it agreed to in exchange for a very... The deadline it agreed to, not out of charity, in exchange for a very lucrative franchise agreement. That deadline is June of next year. They have 14 months to cover half the city, and their feet are not being held to the fire. And we won't have a fair city where people can actually fully participate in the modern economy unless we use our power through this franchise agreement to get it done. As soon as I get this information from the CIO, I intend to make it public so we can all put pressure on the city and on Verizon to get everyone access.
And so, Ben, you're running for mayor. You know, the first day in office, and you can call up the CEOs of Verizon, also Time Warner Cable, also Cablevision, who are providing both unusually expensive, and I think most people in this room probably feel substandard broadband connections. I mean, you know, you can get better internet connections in Latvia, you can get better internet connections in Chattanooga. It's like, and particularly like for folks in the media business and tech businesses in Manhattan, like, I mean, it's crazy how bad the connections are. And I wonder, you know, what do you say, what kind of leverage does the mayor's office have?
I think we have tremendous leverage because, by the way, I'll give you another fun statistic to compare to your Latvia point. Internet service is 29 times more expensive here than in South Korea, which is obviously a competitor economy. I mean, we have tremendous leverage. If we are going to make clear to the private sector that the opportunity to do business in the thriving, lucrative New York City market comes with real obligations. And let's face it, we are dealing with an economic system that has unfortunately led to huge disparities in recent years and hasn't provided the underpinnings for a healthy economy going forward, because in so many cases, government has been willing to make extremely unbalanced deals with the private sector, where certain firms benefit and the public interest is not guaranteed. And I think what we need to introduce is a crazy, wacky, free enterprise idea called competition, where if you don't provide for the public, you don't get the next franchise.
And I guess beyond the question of the next franchise, Speaker Quinn, there's smaller cities, like Chattanooga was the one I just mentioned, have built out their own, either their own or have contracted out municipal broadband, basically a new entrant into that market, which is very expensive, you know, hundreds of $millions up front, using sometimes public assets like the MTA's property to run these lines. I mean, that's, and create another competitor essentially to the existing. Do you think, should New York do that? Should New York spend the money on that?
You know, first of all, I mean, I just think the issue of the franchise agreements, just to go back for that, is a profound power that the mayor has, and the borough presidents know from the Franchise Concession and Review Committee how significant the mayor's power is on that, and how really almost singular it is to make sure that these deals get lived up to, and also that they get pulled back if people aren't meeting the standards of the agreement. So that, obviously, the first way to do it would be to try to make sure this can happen with those we're franchising with. If that can't happen, and isn't happening, as we're moving to different providers, we may very well have to look at the city taking this on. It's an enormous undertaking and a huge financial obligation, but there is only so far in this area we can fall behind the rest of the world and still remain competitive.
And do you have sort of specific deadlines you'd like to see, by which point New York would be at some kind of median, speed and cost?
Well, first of all, I think the public advocate's right. The first deadline is that in the franchise agreement for the rest of the city, and I think we have to give ourselves really no later than, say, 2018 to be at the place where we are really competitive again.
Comptroller Thompson?
Yeah, if you looked at cities across the country that have entered and created their own network, it has been spotty. In some places it worked, in others it hasn't worked. And they've made that huge investment. We have a great opportunity to be able to squeeze the companies that are doing business with us and get them to be able to move in a direction. It is, the one thing, and I will agree in this case with the public advocate, the lack of competition within our contracts, the lack of holding people accountable and then saying, you haven't delivered, we're going to bring a competitor in, or we're going to move you out. It gives us great leverage, and it really is leverage that is almost single-handedly held by the mayor in a number of ways. I remember arguing at as comptroller at the last round of cable contracts, and your voice was very, the voice that you could bring to it was a very quiet one, no matter how loud you shouted. The mayor has great leverage to be able to move that forward. I think it is a great opportunity to be able to create competition in that area and to be able to get New York City and the other part of it, it isn't just Manhattan. It's across the city of New York. It is in all 5 boroughs to create that connectivity across the city of New York and to create speed and equity and access. That's the thing that is lacking now also. Manhattan is one thing, and it's spotty there. The rest of the city really is, it's like being in another world and not having the same opportunities. We need to do that also.
It sounds like, Mr. Currier, you support a kind of big municipal broadband network. Does anybody else, do you, Comptroller Liu, support you spending city money building out a new network?
The reality is that the city has already embarked on a huge project. It started, I would say, about 6 or 7 years ago with a project called Nice Wings. And that was to create a wireless network all across the city, not necessarily to provide Wi-Fi to everybody in the city, but at least for city functions, to track where city vehicles were, to be able to gauge where, even tap into the water meter readers. And so the city embarked on a $1 billion project to basically connect the city onto its own system. And as far as we can tell, that project is years behind and over budget by a lot. So this is yet another one of these computerization projects under the Bloomberg administration that has not quite passed,
so do you think,
not been quite up to speed.
Do you think the Liu administration could pull it off, or is this just the government can't do this stuff?
No, I think government can do it. I think the city can embark on this because the size of New York City is such that we can achieve these economies of scale. But I think you have to either have your own employees do it, or if you're going to, for whatever reason, bring in outside consultants, as this administration often does, you have to at least have city managers watching these outside consultants. The problem under the Bloomberg administration is that they have generally hired consultants to watch consultants who are watching consultants. That doesn't work. It leads to huge cost overruns, it leads to time delays, and nothing ever gets done. So I'll give credit to everybody here. I think under any of us, we would actually have city employees, city managers watching either city employees doing the work, or if absolutely necessary, outside consultants doing the work, but keeping strict tabs on that. And also having these contracts that are not on a paid per hour basis, but rather on a project completion basis, so that there's not all this incentive for these outside consultants to keep charging more and more and more hours and spending as much time as they want. The other thing about the franchises is that The mayor can be much tougher on the franchise companies. Unfortunately, I have to say this, Mayor Bloomberg treats the franchise companies like separate private businesses. I've talked to him about, these ridiculous blackouts that our cable subscribers have to cope with as the content providers and our cable companies are bickering with each other. The only people that get hurt are New York City residents. Everybody's got to pay their cable bill whether or not they can watch the World Series on Channel 5. I mean, this is ridiculous. And when I've spoken with Mayor Bloomberg about it, he's saying like, well, that's between the companies. No, it's not between the companies. It is our responsibility as a city government to make sure that our residents who are subject to these monopolies and they still have to pay their cable bills actually get the service that they already paid for. It's our job to stay on top of our franchise companies. Mayor Bloomberg's response was, well, if they can't watch the World Series, they can go read a book. I kid you not. The point is that if we are going to hand out monopoly franchises to these huge companies, they've got to live up to their expectations, they've got to deliver their end of the bargain, and we've got to hold them accountable for that.
And I think on this sort of connectivity, on the connectivity question, there's sort of two different tracks. There's this question of equity and of getting particularly students access. There's also this question of companies in Manhattan having a hard time getting functional broadband, and then in huge chunks of the city you really can't have a modern media technology company because the speed isn't high enough. And I wonder, I mean, just to go back to this question, how do you do that? I saw you raising your hand, Mr. Albanese.
Well, I think it's essential that the city of New York has broadband expands throughout the city in every single neighborhood. It's on trains, on buses. It's essential to economic development. We have a lot of young people coming into the city now and with startups, and I think it's political malpractice not to expand the broadband throughout the city of New York. If we want to remain a world-class city, we have to do it. We have no choice. We have competition from cities across the world now. We have competition from other American cities, and we're far behind. Our infrastructure is rated D+. We have a reactive government. We saw that with Sandy, where for 10 years we were warned about a storm and nothing was done about it. So we have to think about New York City 100 years from now. I know it's not politically sexy, but we've got to have a government that thinks ahead. And part of the problem that we have is we have, unfortunately, dysfunctional politics. I mean, bad governance is one of the problems that Americans face, and New York City is part of it. We have these campaigns flooded with special interest money. It's no accident some of these franchises are connected to huge lobbyists going and lobbying the government, and people are not making decisions on the merits. When you become mayor, you've got to be objective and make sure that the public interest is served. And if we're going to grow this city and continue to be the prime city, we have to make sure our government is clean and transparent. And that's why my fundraising is just, I'm not accepting money from lobbyists or developers, because when I get to City Hall, I want to make decisions on the merits. And we can't ignore that, because that's where the rubber meets the road. Because in campaigns, you hear a lot of rhetoric, but you've got to follow the money. You've got to see who's supporting who and what's driving the policy. That's essential.
Before this panel, I looked this up, hoping that I could put these guys on the spot on having taken huge sums from these companies. But actually, for whatever reason, Time Warner, Verizon, and Cablevision have not been giving large checks to the guys on this stage. Dave Saltonstall and I looked into this. And there's so much for that gotcha. But Mr. de Blasio, what do you think? Technology 100 years into the future?
Well, but let me just pick up from the previous dialogue. Look, the fact that this sector will determine our future, besides the fact it pervades, I agree, it is not the slice, it's the whole pie, and it's the plate. It's that it will, the frying pan, don't mix your metaphors.
Google Glass is the plate.
But as a question of economic sector, this is our strongest growth sector, and when you think about the fact that that is being gummed up because of monopoly dynamics in this city that seem age-old, and then get magnified by the current administration. Now, look, no one's going to accuse Michael Bloomberg of being swayed by campaign contributions. The difference with Michael Bloomberg is that he sees the corporate titans of this city as his peers and is willing to take their word for it and doesn't drive a hard bargain in terms of franchise agreements or anything else. I want to just give you a little juxtaposition. Our friends in California and places like San Francisco and Los Angeles have innovated an approach to government contracting that says if the private companies don't hold up their end of the bargain, not only are there sanctions, but it has an impact on whether they can get additional contracts. Now, when you talk about something like Verizon's franchise agreement with the city, if Verizon knew the city meant that kind of business, and there were real consequences, I assure you they would not have left out so many neighborhoods the way they have so far. And I think we need to bring those consequences into the game. And just in case there are people in the room worried that this might be unfair to Verizon and Verizon might be hurting in the middle of this economy, let me note that last week, shares of Verizon Communications, Inc. hit a 12-year high, and the company profits jumped 16% during the first quarter of 2013, beating analyst estimates. So I think they have the money.
I'm sure they appreciate your concern. Mr. Carrion?
Ben, you know, clearly the applause line here is that the providers are profiting and not giving us the best service, that we don't have the infrastructure that the Bloomberg administration, while it albeit has started to advance this agenda, we have a long way to go. I think the real question for us, and that's easy, that any of us can do that, we're experienced politicians and we can tell you something that you and I are angry about and we'll all applause, and that's really nice. The real question for the leader of the city...
He's not asking for applause here.
Yeah, no, I'm not. And the real question for the leaders of the city is where we're going. And I think what we have to do is we have to set a clear, unequivocal, not timid goal about what we want New York City to be in the global economy, and then everything will fall off from there. Christine Quinn mentioned the Franchise and Concession Review Committee, or is it
FCRC.
FCRC. That is a very powerful tool that the mayor has, and we have to use it. So we have to come back and set our objective, which is we want to be the most wired city on the globe. We want to be the global leader in this space. We want to be the most user-friendly wired city on the globe. We want to beat out Northern California, frankly. That's part of our objective. We want to grow the gray hairs right here in this city, because we know that you can launch, you can capitalize early, but when you get to the talent needs of sustaining a tech company, an IT company, or when you want to go to scale, it's very difficult to do it here in New York City. One, because we don't have the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, and two, because we don't have the length of history in this space, and we haven't been a user-friendly city. So I think it's about goal setting and not beating up on the fact that, look, we can call the question on all the providers. We can call Time Warner, Verizon, and everybody else and into City Hall and say, we're revisiting these contracts. And by law, we have a lot of latitude in that space. We can work with the City Council. We can work with the state legislature when needed. But the fact is we have to make a serious commitment to get there and tell that to the rest of the world so we can start attracting business here.
So obviously the issue we're talking about here is central, right? Having the ability for everyone to be connected. But there's another important issue out there if we're really going to be thinking how to grow this industry long term and how to do it in a way that helps New Yorkers get better jobs and helps deal with income inequality in this city. And that's the fact that what we're talking about here, about having challenges, connecting, absolutely you hear that from the industry. But one of the other things you hear over and over from the industry is they're actually having trouble filling jobs. They're having trouble finding coders out there. That's something we in city government can help respond to. The Academy for Software Engineering that Fred Wilson is doing is going to help to respond to that. The technical assistance program that we in the council, working with folks in this room, have put together at CUNY to take computer science students and make sure, with input from the industry, the curriculum in that program was designed by the tech sector, with input from people in this room and others, to make sure those CUNY graduates, when they came out of this program, after also having done a paid internship at a tech sector, would have a degree and a certificate, so to speak, that was as competitive as Cornell or anywhere else. Or the Queen's Coalition program we've all put together, where we're taking adults who have no computer experience, and at LaGuardia Community College, teaching them coding. So those individuals, many of them underemployed, can come out and be competitive to be part of the tech sector. We need to grow programs like that more broadly in this city, using places like CUNY to bring New Yorkers into this sector, so we're not hearing the challenge of not having enough folks who can do coding, etc., and we're helping New Yorkers become part of this great economic opportunity.
Speaker, the programs you mentioned, particularly I guess the first couple, I mean, these are programs with I think dozens, if not maybe 100 students, but
I mean, we can grow them, and that they're there.
Of course, but you know, in terms of like some of these things, like teaching kids to code, particularly, I mean, is this something that should be in every school in your first year and your second year? I mean, sort of how ambitious would you be about pushing this stuff into the crowded public schools curriculum right off the bat?
So let me just say, look, the technical assistance program and the Queen's Coalition program, they're not huge today, that's true. But they're two programs that were created by my office and the City Council that exist, are putting people through a program, a small number to start, who will then be able to get good jobs. They're a pilot program which now exists and we can take to scale, and it's a pilot program that's a real partnership between the industry and city government. That's the model we want to expand. We need to get, obviously, as was said before, young people know how to do computers better than any of us. That's what Andrew's mouse model was always based on and has been so successful. Still, we need to get computer science into the Common Core, and then we need to move as quickly as we can. And I know Fred's model is going to start with additional to the academy, 20 computer science programs in 20 high schools to move as quickly as we can to get that into every high school and then into every middle school.
Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, I mean, we can look at both short and long-term goals, and short-term goals are, you know, pushing the companies to make sure that there is better service across the city of New York, that businesses right now have that access, that individuals and communities have that access. But it comes back to the larger vision. What's the larger vision that comes from the mayor that looks at things a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but also 10 and 12 years down the road? That's what has to occur. So you need to, as we look at, you know, being the high-tech capital of the country and one of the high-tech capitals of the world, we're producing jobs that our students can't get. If we don't start to look at that and align things with not just our high schools, technology needs to be infused across the system in elementary and junior high schools. It is asking asking people on the tech side, what are you looking for? And then starting to have students in high school and our community colleges who can fill those jobs. It is looking across the city of New York. We want to grow businesses. We want to grow businesses and entrepreneurs across the city. Where's the capital coming to expand that? New York City needs to be able to do that, and we can, using pension funds and other things. But what's the larger vision first? And then short and long-term goals within it. So you have a city that's wired. You have a city that is generating jobs, and those good middle-income jobs. But we also have then our students, our young people, who are able to fill and meet those jobs. That's the larger vision. It's a combination. Long and short term, it is, as I said, it's great to have a vision. If we don't back it with capital, if we don't say, what does it take? Is it synergies? Is it, what type of office space is necessary? All of those things together, that creates the larger vision. And the truth is, that should come from City Hall, working with the tech sector. That's how we grow that vision.
Mr. de Blasio?
Yeah, I want to talk about the question of how we connect talent to the jobs we have, but just a word, since Adolfo mentioned our rivals on the other side of the country, I'd just like to say, if Arnold Schwarzenegger were here, he would say this. He would say, Northern California, your domination of the tech industry is being terminated. And
That was a bad imitation, Bill.
Yeah.
Bill.
It's the truth.
Yeah.
It's the truth. Because the fact is that we have what I think is going to be, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger reference always works. I just want to say for the record.
I'm terminating all accents that are not actually yours moving forward at all debates. There's a new city council rule on that.
We'll see about that.
Those council rules are popping up overnight.
People like accents. But the fact is, in terms of where the content is, where the connection to markets all over the world is, you know, where the facility in every language spoken on the earth is, that's all here. So with all due respect to Silicon Valley, we have the constituent pieces of what I think will make for the strongest center of the tech industry in the country, and I think on the earth. And I think the challenge here, of course, it is there are infrastructure challenges, but I think the talent question needs a deeper and city-sponsored solution. I think the city needs to step in to address the fact that, look, startups, by definition, are moving very quickly with limited resources, you know, relying on their creativity and ingenuity. They don't have time to start, you know, sophisticated HR departments. This is an area where the city can actually provide a crucial connecting role that would be a fantastic investment of our resources. I would suggest a talent bank for tech, a city-sponsored effort literally to take the many people who have the skills and connect them to the many jobs they're wanting, and help startups to do the work that they're trying to do, but have that public helping hand in a vivid, direct way. I think that's the kind of investment that has a huge multiplier effect for this city. And there's no question to me that then unleashes all the other good, because again, we have the content. That's never going to be our problem in New York City. Getting the talent to the jobs is a central challenge.
Ben, you know, Arnold or Bill, oh, I'm confused, I'm sorry, is right about the talent being here. And we just having as city government to build on the programs that are out there in a more focused way to make sure all the dots are being connected. But there's also other things we can do as government to connect the dots around the challenges some are facing in the tech sector. You know, for example, one of the things we hear a lot about is space and how unaffordable it is, and it is hard for startups and others to find space. That's why we need to continue and expand the network of incubators we have across the city and have more of them for the tech sector. We've built a number of those. We need to do more moving forward. It's why we're right now trying to seize the opportunity of the old back office space in downtown Brooklyn and find ways to make that available and affordable to the tech sector. Right now, Dumbo is chock-a-block with tech. Brooklyn Navy Yard, doing great. We should have a Brooklyn tech triangle between Dumbo, the Navy Yard, and downtown Brooklyn. And that's what we in the council are developing right now with NYU and Polytechnic. And think about the potential. In downtown Brooklyn today, there are more college and graduate students than there are in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Downtown Brooklyn is college town, not Cambridge, Massachusetts. We need to harness that to really create a robust Brooklyn tech triangle and take those back office spaces in downtown and create programs that make them affordable and retrofitted and workable for the tech sector in Brooklyn.
Mr. Alderman.
I spent the last 15 years in the private sector, and the grumbling amongst most people in the private sector is that the public schools are not producing educated young people because of you know, flawed structure or what have you. So we have to address public education, number one, and that's not an easy task to do. I have a plan to do it by intervening very early on and making sure that these kids, when they come into our buildings, can have the skills and the ability to learn, and so they can move forward. The other thing that I noticed is that I was at New York Tech Day yesterday on the pier. There were hundreds of entrepreneurs there. these startups, and these young kids have so much energy, and what they're saying is, look, we have a lot of jobs available. We need people that have the skills. What I'd like to do is use the CUNY system and actually pay to train New York City residents, and have these companies hire them as part of the bargain, helping them with space and incentives, so that there will be real jobs for them when they graduate on a broad-based level. We have great community colleges. CUNY is one of the great jewels of New York City. We're just not utilizing it. The linkage between industry, the City University of New York is really cursory in nature. It's not extensive. We've got to institutionalize that. We also, I'm going to appoint a deputy mayor for technology. So we'll have an economic development agency. Will be friendly to starters. People can go on a computer and get licensed and what have you, so you don't have to go through all kinds of red tape. And we have to provide space. Affordability is a factor. Even affordable housing. I was at an event the other night, and a young entrepreneur who runs a company in Dumbo, 24 employees, she told me that she's concerned that all of her interns from NYU and Columbia can't stay in the city. She'd like to hire them because they can't afford the housing. They'll go to Austin, they'll go to Portland. So we've got to put together an affordable housing plan. Mayor Bloomberg has a good idea with the 200 square foot units. It's like a college dorm, but kids would take advantage of that. We've got to make developers build more affordable housing, but it's just not, we have to address the schools, affordable housing. We're at a great time in the city because all of these young kids have tremendous energy. I mean, if you were at that pier yesterday, it was incredible to see. I mean, literally hundreds of them and starting these little companies. And they just need the city to help them.
To bring it back to some of those companies, what Fred Wilson was talking about this morning, something a lot of tech entrepreneurs find incomprehensible, are regulations that get in the way of, I guess Airbnb was the business he mentioned. He sort of vilified the hotel lobby, but I think actually, particularly for the folks on this stage, he should probably be vilifying the hotel workers union, who is probably somebody you guys talk to more. I mean, and I wonder, in the specific case of Airbnb, should they be, I mean, which is technically illegal in the city despite being huge and despite providing a kind of affordable rental that you can't get from hotel. Comptroller Lou, do you think they should be allowed to kind of dive into this market? I mean, should the government be putting up barriers?
Should who? You say should?
So the company Airbnb, which or just I don't know if anybody else wanted to jump in on this one who had stronger feelings than Airbnb.
Yeah, I think it is not a question in that case of just access to a service. I think this is a different matter when you talk about the fact that we have laws to ensure the quality of any habitation, whether it's residential or whether it's a hotel habitation. The problem with mixing the two in an open market is you are exposing folks who live in a building, who maybe rental it, maybe a co-op, whatever it is, who live by a set of ground rules about safety and security to folks who are not part of that system and maybe only passing through for a few days. And that's not what the residents of the building signed up for. So that's the core issue.
Ben, let me just jump in here. I mean, the public advocate's right. The issue of Airbnb isn't really one about technology at its core. I mean, we are having across this city loss of affordable rental units to landlords who are, and these are not necessarily the folks who are on Airbnb, but this is happening simultaneously, to landlords who are converting their residential units into tourist hotels. The night of Hurricane Sandy, there was a building collapse on 8th Avenue on Chelsea. Every person who was in the building that night was a tourist, all who came to New York City through one travel company. Now, that building wasn't up to code, in part, I think, because the landlord didn't have the same urgency because people weren't living there. 2, it was 15 or 20 units of affordable housing that were gone in Chelsea. That's not allowed. By law, you are not allowed to take rental apartments and make them hotel units. Now,
this is an incredibly popular company and service operating globally.
The issue we should take from this isn't that laws on housing and safety get trumped by the potential of entrepreneurs. But what we do need to take from this is that we need to add tech entrepreneurs more into the conversation about government. Because had Airbnb entered the conversation earlier, there might have been different relief that could be offered to them in Albany. And in fact, my office is in conversation with them now to see if there is some way to thread the needle differently for them than others. So I think what we have to take from this is not a good idea overrides fundamental laws of New York, but we need to have this sector more front and center in the conversations as other stakeholders have been.
And Mr. Carey, I mean, it's not like this is a theoretical question. Airbnb is all over the place. People use it all the time. I mean, can the city catch up?
I'm not entirely convinced that it is a gigantic issue. It is an important issue, though. But it speaks to something else that is happening around the world and that we have to catch up with here in New York City. My daughter is doing her spring semester, junior year spring semester in Barcelona. So we went to visit her. And guess what? We used the service to find a room, to find an affordable room in a European city. And if you're buying hotel space in any city, in any major city in the world, you know, one, it's priced very competitively. So it speaks to some larger issues. You know, we have a very low, very high occupancy rate or a very low vacancy rate of hotel rooms in New York City. People want to come here. I think we have to take a public policy posture that says we grew to 52 million tourists last year. That industry generates 350,000 jobs. 90,000 of those jobs are in the hotel sector. That sector can continue to grow. We need to figure out ways to make New York City much more user-friendly so that people are not, you know, exploiting those opportunities to take a unit that we need for affordable housing for a New York family and turning it into an unsafe situation and a for-profit situation for them. The rules don't even apply. Obviously, they're defying every rule, every law. They're making the building unsafe. But let me just sort of make a U-turn and go back for a second to the talent problem that we have in the city. Right now, there are 3,000 job openings in the tech sector here in New York City that are going unfilled. And we have a high unemployment rate in the black community that's almost pushing 20%, and in the Latino community just under that, but just about almost the same. So we're importing techs, we're importing engineers, we're importing data managers, we're importing programmers, we're importing people for our health sector that are high-tech people, and we have a domestic workforce that we can grow right here in New York City. So we have to make a real commitment to build up a domestic workforce that can grow this economy.
I wanted to circle back to...
Hey, by the way, I got an applause line. That's pretty good.
You really can't have it all. I wanted to circle back to an education question that I left out before, but that I wanted to ask Comptroller Thompson, both because you ran the Board of Education, and because you've worked with a lot of, along with communities that are very, very eager to have their kids learn technology, there are religious communities in the city that had a huge rally last year to prevent their kids from having access to technology, who consider particularly mobile devices and the internet really a problem. And I wonder, as the city advances toward making technology and learning how to use these things, a really basic standard as it becomes something you need to work, is that going to be a point of tension? Are you going to require Orthodox Jewish communities to teach their kids these tools? Are you going to allow them to not?
I think that, look, in the end, I think that people being able to decide what their children do is part of what America is. But, I want to create opportunities within a public school system, and other school systems have different direction and different guidance. They can make those decisions. But I think within a public school system, I want to create the opportunity for over 1 million children to have, to have the foundation that they need to be able to succeed. That isn't happening right now. So we talk about unemployment. We talk about, being able to look at a city that is going to create greater opportunity in a certain area. Right now, the way it continues, and it's not just the few unemployed adults, it's who comes after them also? It's those young people who are out there in the streets these days, those disconnected youth also, who the school system failed. It's looking to create those opportunities for those students, those who are there, those who are coming. If we're going to grow a city, we want to make sure that those, and we talk about income disparities, then we have to create the base knowledge and the opportunity. So other systems and other schools can make those decisions. I know for a New York City public school system, which is mayor, I would have oversight on, I want to make sure it happens for them.
Mr. Liu?
I think in the schools we have the responsibility to broaden our students' horizons as much as possible and not limit them. And you know, with those advantages, sometimes there are drawbacks that as parents we would not like to see, but nonetheless it's out there. And we might as well steer our children towards the right direction. My wife and I discuss this all the time. How much access should we give our son? And so that's something that the schools...
So how do you deal with that?
Well, listen, the schools, I think, look at our public libraries, right? We've got lots of complaints about people surfing the internet, perhaps inappropriately in our public libraries. And yet the libraries cannot constrain who sees what on the public access terminals. In the schools, we should allow, I think we should have open access, but we should help guide our kids into, you know, understanding what they're seeing on the internet, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, what's real, what's not real. And, you know, you can't protect everybody from all of the material in the internet as much as you want, because at the end of the day, it's still out there. The material is out there whether we like it or not. On the other hand, let's go back to the education and training here. I think our schools can continue to do a much better job. There's a lot of focus on high school graduations. I've long called for a much more higher emphasis on college graduation. We're not graduating enough kids with college degrees, whether they be bachelor's degrees or even associate's degrees. We've got to do better, otherwise we're falling behind other major American cities. Only 42% of city residents today have college degrees, associates or bachelors. We're falling behind other major American cities. I've got a plan that would increase to that percentage to 60% by the year 2025, just to remain economically competitive with other major American cities. And then going back to the connectivity in our schools, you know, we keep saying we want to expand access, we want to expand the connectivity and the infrastructure. We've also got to take a look at some of these old policies that I think are, you know, for whatever reason may have made sense on the spot a few years ago. Today it doesn't make sense. For example, our kids cannot bring their devices to school. And if they do bring their devices to school, they either get them confiscated or they've got to pay for a separate locker to store their cell phones. I mean, you know, so many kids today have the mobile devices, and yet the schools still ban them. We've got to rethink that policy because we want our kids to be connected. But what we can't say to our kids, we want them to access the internet, to learn on the internet. And then when they come to school, take away the only device they have to access the internet. That's just
on day one,
a silly policy that I think needs to be overturned.
Is anybody else going to lift the cell phone in schools ban on day one?
So what did you say?
We're going to lift the ban on cell phone in schools.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
The under 18 vote is spoken for. Mr. Blasio?
Yeah, I mean, look, again, I think the central question is access. My wife Charlene and I spend plenty of time trying to help educate our kids how to deal with the content that would be out there. But, you know, the real question for this city is the vast number of kids who don't have access in terms of their future, their education and their economic future. And I think the reality is, you know, just a brief comment on the 20th century. You know, we are working with a 20th century playbook still, and that playbook had a whole lot of inequity built into it. And now we are in a 21st century environment where we have immense change, but also immense opportunity. I like the phrase from Scott's op-ed today. It's we have, in terms of this issue, a rare opportunity to reboot our local economy. This is a transformational moment. If we get it right, we are going to do everything in our power to make sure not only households are connected, and that gets back to changing the rules of the game with the private sector providers, but also changing our approach to curriculum. So much of what we call career and technical education in this city is not based on the modern economy. Relatively few schools have a working partnership with the business community, whether it's in the tech sector or any other element of business, even though the thing that so many of our young people need is a visible pathway to work and to acquiring skills that would actually be usable in this economy. So I'm struck by the fact that a figure we knew before, that almost half of the households in this city could not afford internet access. I believe the figure is very close to 46%. That correlates shockingly consistently with the other 46% figure that came out in the last week, the Bloomberg administration report that said 46% of our city was at or near the poverty level. It's not entirely coincidental. If people don't have access to the core of the modern economy, how do we expect them to thrive? So I think this is time for a 21st century playbook in which it is the government's responsibility to address these inequities, whether it's in the school system, whether it's in the dealing with the private sector, to, from start to finish, guarantee that every young person in this city has equal access to the kind of information, the kind of skills that will determine their economic future.
And you know, Ben, one of the answers to that, to the challenge that the public advocate just accurately laid out, is in this room. And it exists in the tremendous potential, but for high-tech public education partnerships to make sure that there are more robust programs that, like Mouse, that give people internship opportunities and job opportunities, like the technical assistance program at CUNY. So people know that if they go into a program, there is going to be a paid internship. And once you get New York talent into a company, that company's going to want to hold on to that New York talent, particularly if the public-private partnership also extends to the training that they're getting being fueled by input through the industry. So that's just a fundamental part of, as we move forward and expand and have more of a robust focus in our education, in the Department of Education and CUNY, and in our job training programs like the Queens Coalition effort, we recognize that that moment of that internship is central to moving people on to really successful careers.
And Mr. Albanese and Mr. Harry, I'm running a little short of time
At the core of this discussion is how do we improve our education system? And I, as I said, I understand it from the ground up because I was there. And we're missing a big component. We all agree that we need a chancellor who's an educator. We have to stop teaching to the test. We have to stop closing so many of our schools, and we all support universal pre-K. What's missing from this equation, I beat this drum everywhere I go, is that what we know now, through compelling scientific evidence, is that poverty causes stress, and stress causes developmental issues. The first 3 years of a child's life are pivotal. And we're not addressing it. It's political malpractice. We know it, and we're not addressing it. I've got a plan where I want to establish a department for early learning and create pediatric wellness clinics in our low-income communities where parents, doctors, and teachers can work together so that these kids, when they come into these buildings at 4 years of age, have the same skill level as middle-class or upper-class kids. You know, an average middle-class kid knows about 10 words at 3 years of age.
Just to take us back to tech policy, not to cut you off, but I think
What I'm saying is that a poor child knows about 3,000 words, and sometimes they never catch up. So we've got to start early, and that's really going to be my approach on day one as mayor.
And I wanted to kind of run down the line on another question as we're sort of running out of time here. This one is not about apps, although I'm sort of slightly saddened that I didn't get to ask Anthony Weiner his favorite apps. But this is another day one question, starting with you, Comptroller Thompson. You know, when you take over the police department, will you consider in your term purchasing or allowing them to purchase unmanned drones for surveillance? I mean, I actually think this is
That's a tech question.
I think that is certainly a tech question. It's probably one that will come up in the next few days.
I don't think that we need it at this point. You know, we have with cameras and a number of other things. I don't want. Well, if you're going to have drones.
Sorry, you get all the curveballs because you're on the.
No, it's okay. It's fine. If you're going to have drones, it's a question of I don't want drones peeking in people's homes. I don't want drones. You know. This isn't Ben. I have to admit that's being on the end on this one. I don't think we need drones in a number of different ways. It's not a place I really want to go.
Madam Speaker, drones?
Against it.
Believe it or not, this is not the first time I have been asked that question in the mayoral race contact. The Chelsea Reform Democratic Club had this as a question which Scott could appreciate on their questionnaire. And my answer then and my answer now is no. I don't think, although I recently called for the expansion and use of new technology in mobile cameras, I don't think drones are a safe security measure in New York City.
Mr. Liu?
So I've been chastised recently publicly for my choice of movie favorites. I gotta say, RoboCop, that was a fun movie to watch, okay? No, I'm not saying it was my absolute favorite.
John, day one RoboCops?
Okay? But I don't think we should have RoboCops in New York City. So the answer to that is no. But I would initiate something very quickly in the police department, something that affects people on a daily basis. And this is something that I've called for since my days in the city council. And that is that, you know, in the city of New York, we've just got one huge problem with due process. And that is when you get a parking ticket, you literally gotta prove that you're innocent to get off that ticket. It's, you know, and maybe for decades we didn't have the technology, but today it's so easy since all the parking agents have a handheld device. Moving forward, as the handheld devices get replaced, they should all come equipped with the cameras, so that you can take a picture of a violation, so that if you're being accused of parking too close to the hydrant, somebody should just take a picture of it. If you're being accused of parking in the bus stop, take a picture of it. And that way, once finally, government can actually prove that you're guilty of something, and then you're going to be held liable, as opposed to you being accused, but you have to prove that you're innocent until you get off. So this is something that I think modern technology can easily fix, a simple problem with our due process that modern technology can advance right away. And so that's something that I would clearly advance right away in the NYPD. But no to RoboCops.
That was an impressive segue, sir. Mr. Curry.
So now we're calling drones RoboCops. That's an easy way to get away with that. Look, you know, I think that we know that we are a target for global terrorism, and today the news broke that these two young men that bombed the Boston City Marathon just over a week ago were fixed on coming here to do the same kind of damage in Times Square. And they in fact were packing one of those pressure cooker bombs with the intent of coming to Times Square. At least that's as much as we know right now. I'm sure we're going to discover a lot more in the coming days and weeks. Surveillance was the question about what kind of technology we need to use for surveillance in just about any American city. As the globe morphs into a new reality, and there's a new reality of the tools of terror here domestically. So to say no to drones, that term right now is weighted down by the fact that we've used drones for bombing in other places in the world, killing children and women and other people that were innocent bystanders, and we're having to deal with that in the Congress of the United States, and as a people, and as a free democratic society that's trying to advance freedom. We're also trying to protect ourselves domestically. The question was, do you use that tool for surveillance? I think the responsible answer is you use the tools that are available to you and to your society for surveillance. We have the responsible constitutional and civil and human rights that we uphold. Let us continue to uphold them. But our primary responsibility, the chief executive of the city of New York, needs to make sure that this city is a safe city for everyone.
There's no question it's responsibility of the chief executive to protect people's safety. It's also the responsibility of the chief executive to protect people's liberties.
Thank you.
I agree, Bill de Blasio, I agree.
There is no contradiction, and I will segue to something I think frames this very powerfully. We just saw the opening of the George W. Bush Library, and we get to reflect on what the abuse of civil liberties looked like. We get to reflect on when in the name of security, our values were undercut by our own government. And so, look, here's the problem. Drones, I understand the role they play militarily, but real, legitimate issues, constitutional issues, and civil liberties issues have been raised in this context. And I think we have to be strong enough as a city to say we will devote ourselves to every possible avenue to protect our safety, but we will not violate our Constitution. We will draw that line in the sand. Because this is the whole reality of our country, and I get very frustrated by the way some people frame the discussion of safety in this city. You know, I'm someone who believes, in fact, the path to long-term safety and security is through fixing and mending the relationship between the police and community, mending the excesses of stop and frisk and other things that have violated people's civil liberties that actually make it harder to create a safe environment because you don't have the same communication and collaboration between police and community. I think that is equally true when it comes to fighting terrorism. We need a very close working relationship with each and every community of this city, with every immigrant community, including the Muslim community. We need to make sure the city government is engaging people, communicating on each and every level. We don't want to take actions like drones that could easily lend themselves to the violation of people's civil liberties across the board. It's not a road we want to go down. There's plenty of other ways to protect our people and keep them safe.
The last word on drones.
I think that the chief executive of the city's primary responsibility is to keep the city safe. And I'm committed to doing that. We've got a great anti-terrorism unit with 1,000 officers. We're going to keep them there. And they're continuing to do a great job. As far as drones are concerned, I have some practical problems with them. I mean, I think an Alitalia pilot a couple of weeks ago thought he saw a drone and started to panic. I mean, we have congested skies here, planes and helicopters everywhere. Do we need something else flying around that might create some kind of a crash over the city? So I have practical concerns about the use of drones as well as civil liberties concerns.
Well, thank you for indulging me on that, and thank you. And I think we're basically out of time here, but thanks so much to Borough President Scott Stringer and his staff for putting out like a really excellent report in a good form. And thank you to these candidates for showing up, and thank you to all of you for coming.